Hey everyone, this is Johnnie Alexander. Welcome back to another episode of Novelists Unwind. I'm so glad you're here with us. Today's special guest is Jan Drexler, who is just very well known for her Amish fiction, historical fiction, and the research that she puts into those stories. So we're going to talk to Jan a little bit about her writing journey and about these amazing stories that she writes. Jan, tell us about how you got started writing, and then why the Amish genre is so special to you.
Well, I got started writing. I've always been interested in writing. I was a creative writing major in college,
Yeah.
but my first goal and my first priority was to have a family. And homeschooling our 4 children took up my time for that was my first career.
Right.
But that career has forced retirement. Once your children get to, at the end of high school, it's done.
It's done. Yeah.
And so when my youngest boys were in high school, getting toward the end of high school, I started thinking, what am I going to do after this? And I thought, my husband's encouraged me to take up writing again and see what would happen with it. And I had no thought that I would ever sell a story or a book. But I said, well, give me 3 years and I'll try, not knowing that 3 years is a very short time.
It is.
To try to do anything like that. But I did sell my first story to Woman's World within that 3-year period, and my first novel to Love Inspired within that 3-year period.
Right.
So I was off and running, and God just keeps giving me the stories, and I just keep writing them.
Oh, that's wonderful. How many books do you have published now? Several.
Let me count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The Sound of Distant Thunder is number 9.
Oh, wow. Wow, that's great. So we're going to talk about The Sound of Distant Thunder, which now, has it already released, or it releases pretty soon?
It releases September 18th.
Okay, September 18th. Show us the cover. It's so pretty.
Sure.
Thank you.
I love the cover.
Yeah, it's very pretty. And it's the first book, I've got it written down here, the Amish of Weaver's Creek series. Now, is Weaver's Creek a real place?
It's a place that grew out of my imagination, but it's located in Holmes County, in southern Holmes County, where there are a lot of Amish all through Holmes County, Ohio.
Ohio, right, yeah.
Yes. And so I kind of took Apple Creek and Sugar Creek and Berlin and Charm and kind of wove them all around into this community that I have. And the Weavers, there's Weaver's Creek, and the Weaver family is the main family for the story, the whole series.
Well, and I haven't had a chance to read it, but it sounds so fascinating. Tell us a little bit about the Civil War and how that is playing a part in this, and I suppose in the whole series.
In the whole series, it is. In southern Ohio, they were quite close to the fighting, actually. In Kentucky and Tennessee, and not so much in Pennsylvania, because the fighting there was in eastern Pennsylvania, but West Virginia, Maryland, that area. And so the southern Ohio people were affected by the war. There were sympathizers for both sides who lived in that area. The Southern Democrat sympathizers were called Copperheads, because they were, and I'm not sure, I forget exactly why, but the whole idea is that they turned on their neighbors, kind of thing. And
I'm from Ohio, so I mean, and had relatives who fought on the Union side, but I grew up in Central Ohio, but my family is from that Southern Ohio region. Ironton, right there, close to the.
Right. Ohio was always officially a Union state, but there were sympathizers with the Confederates in that part. And so the Amish living in that area were caught up in the political and social things going on in their area, but they, of course, traditionally keep themselves separate from war. And my story revolves around a young man, Jonas, who is conflicted in his convictions. he's against slavery and sympathetic to the abolitionist movement. So he wants slavery to end, but at the same time, his churches taught him that you do not fight.
Right.
You do not participate in war. So the story revolves around his conflict of what he's going to do.
I found it really interesting. I was reading on your website, and you make at least a slight distinction between being non-resistant and being a pacifist, and did say that even though the church has this stance on it, that it really was up to an individual.
Yes.
What they wanted to do, which I found that really fascinating too.
And it's true today too in the Amish culture. Until you have taken the vows of membership to the church, your decision is your own.
Oh, wow.
And so until a person reaches 18 to 22 years old, somewhere in that age range, and that's when the decision comes to join the church or not join the church. And many of them do. Most of the young people in the church join the church and stay with their families in their church. If they don't join the church, they are not shunned. They're not looked down upon. The parents might, worry about them because they're not part of their church.
Right.
But it's really is an individual choice. Once you take those vows of membership, though, they're like marriage vows. They're taken very seriously. And then you don't have a choice. You have already made your choice to obey the church.
That's so fascinating. So there are a lot of myths out there about the community and about how things,
And I know every community interprets the ways of doing things differently. So you may have one community that's much more strict. You may have another community that's much more liberal.
I've done a little bit of research on the Amish recently, and also recently moved to Oklahoma. So there are a few, not many, but a few Amish communities here, and they use tractors because of the soil being it just was impossible to use the horses and plows because that. But because of that, some people weren't happy about that and moved back. They moved back where they could still do the horses and stuff. So it really is interesting that you just have all these differences, and it's not just like a one size fits all.
Correct. Yeah. Each Amish community is independent of the other communities. So they make their own rules, they make their own decisions.
And you know a lot about this, not only because you write books about the Amish, but because that's your heritage as well. So
when I remember being a little girl and visiting my grandmother in northern Indiana, and she would live within walking distance of her grocery store. So we were walking to the grocery store, and she pointed to the hitching rail with all the horses and buggies tied up to it. And she told me that our ancestors had been Amish. And so that was a beginning for me of wondering, why aren't we Amish anymore?
So why aren't you?
Well, in the 1860s, about the same time as the Civil War, there was a split in the Amish church. And my ancestors went with the more liberal side of the split. And the more conservative side of the split is what we know now as the Old Order Amish.
Okay.
Because they kept to the old ways, the old order.
Yeah, and was your family, and I'm sorry if I missed it, were they in Ohio during this time?
They were. One branch of the family was. I kind of mentioned them in The Sound of Distant Thunder. It's the Schrock family who lived in Wayne County, which is the county just north of Holmes County. And they emigrated from there to northern Indiana.
Oh, okay. Well, and I asked because of reading Naomi's Hope. So I did get a chance to read this book by Jan, Naomi's Hope. And I will tell you, I just loved it. I can hardly put it down. And I will also confess that the Amish genre is not one that I've been drawn to very much. So I probably have read maybe 4 or 5 Amish novels. So yours, was like the 4th or 5th. and it was, but I was so engaged in the story, and your writing is just, it's, you're a lovely writer, and
thank you.
Really you are, and you just get so deep into these characters, and and then the historical research was there. And of course, I'm one of those people. I read the acknowledgments, I read author notes, I read forwards and I read it all.
I do too.
So I was reading. So part of Naomi's hope, and again, just a lovely story, is about someone who comes in and tries to sow seeds of discord within the community, because they are kind of separated by a swamp. So there's some issues in that, and this person's trying to use that for his own advantage. And then you said that, you made him up, but that discord really was happening at that time.
Yes. The whole split, which the Amish call the Great Schism, started in those two communities in northern Indiana, between Elkhart County and LaGrange County.
That's right, Indiana, not Ohio. Yeah, I'm sorry. That's earlier, that's right. Yeah.
And they did resolve the split that threatened in the 1840s, which is when Naomi's Hope takes place. But then the split finally did happen in the 1860s.
Right. Wow. That's just, it's so fascinating. And I just loved, again, the writing, because, as a writer, and I'm sure, you do this too, it's hard to shut off your editor when you're reading someone else's book, so you're saying, why'd they do that? I know we're just, all that kind of stuff is going on in your head. And I love it when I can actually get lost in a story, which I did with this one. But I'm also learning from it too, picking up little tidbits, because I love the character of Shem, who's like the bad guy.
Yes.
And yet you never say, we're told this all the time, show, don't tell, show, don't tell. And you never say he's a bad guy, but it's so cool how you just he takes the chair that an elderly guy was sitting in and he sits in it. So now that man has to sit somewhere else. Or he takes 2 slices of bread when it seemed like it would have been more polite just to take one. And I thought, this is genius, just these very subtle ways of characterizing him. And we know he's not a good guy.
And I learned that from reading. I read voraciously, and I try to read the best books available. And I guess over the years, I've just picked up that technique of showing, not telling. And
good.
I love the character of Shem. When he got his comeuppance, I just had so much fun with that scene.
I love that scene too, and I don't want to really give a spoiler, but he is you just want to take him out behind the woodshed, and then something happens, and all of a sudden you see, oh my, poor Shem.
Yeah, he was a fun character.
I bet he was. It was so cool. Let me see what else I want to talk to you about. You write for Revell. You write these wonderful series for them. You write for Love Inspired. You've also written a Western for Love Inspired that it was Amish based. So, and I know they don't have their historical line anymore, so it must have been a while since you wrote that. But
it was been a few years.
Was that inspired by your now living in South Dakota?
Yes, it was. We moved here in 2011, so we've been here just about 7.5 years. And whenever we move to a new area, I just have to immerse myself in the history of it. I love history. And we are just down the road from Deadwood.
Oh, wow.
Deadwood, where, Wild Bill Hickok was shot in the back, holding a hand of aces and eights. Right. All the stories that go with the Black Hills area, not only the gold mining, like in Deadwood, but also the Indian Wars in the 1800s, the cowboys. We have good friends who are ranchers, and they are real cowboys.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it's so much fun to live here. And so that story, A Home for His Family, was a chance for me to explore the history of the area.
Oh, that's so cool. I lived in Nebraska for a time, and this has been a long time ago, but that history was so, the only way I can say it was so current. Even though it was history, it was like we were still in it. Like, I did writers workshops at a community college, or like a writers clinic, to help the students with their writing. And these students' grandparents were the ones who had settled that area. I mean, it was
That's right.
so close. And I took some English classes and things, and we read like Black Elk Speaks, which of course all takes place up there with the Sioux
Lakota and the, yes.
Yes, and it was just yeah, I shared that same fascination. I would have loved to have gone and actually visited the Black Hills area, because it just seemed.
Well, you should have.
I
We have
know.
a beautiful area to visit.
I know, it's like when you're close to a place like that, and you always think, oh, someday I'll get there, and then you move away and you
Right.
done it. So, same way in Florida. I lived in Florida like 20 years and was never in the Everglades.
Oh. Oh, well.
Think you have the chance, and then you don't. So, what's next? You're writing more books in this series.
That's right. Right now I'm working on the sequel to The Sound of Distant Thunder, and it takes place in the middle of the war. And one of the things that happens is that Morgan's Raiders did a foray up into Ohio during the war in 1863, right about the same time that the Battle of Gettysburg was going on, and a couple weeks following that.
Wow.
And so that comes into play in the second book. And then the third book will take place toward the end of the war, after the surrender at Appomattox, and the soldiers start coming back home. And I won't give away too much on that, but that book is still in the planning stages.
Right. Oh, it just sounds like a great series. And yeah, I hope to get a chance to read all of those, because again, I just love your writing. Also loved your website. It's beautiful. Some beautiful pictures there that just are so peaceful and calming, and just love that. And then also, if you just kind of get, dig down into it on the more page, I think you have recipes and talk about the Yankee Bell Cafe, which is a cooking blog.
Well, it's cooking and life kind of blog.
Okay.
There are 5 of us that are in the blog. It's a group blog of writers. We're all published authors.
Okay, we had a little tiny sound glitch, but we're back connected again. So we were talking about the Yankee Bell Cafe cooking blog, group blog. So just tell us about that. Start over telling us about that.
Okay. The Yankee Bell Cafe is a group blog. There are 5 authors in the blog. It's myself and Ruth Logan Hearn, Mindy Obenhaus, Kate Nolan. Now I'm going to forget somebody. Missy Tippins.
Oh, okay.
Is that all of us? I think that's all of us. And we met on the Seekerville blog, which is a blog for writers and aspiring writers and readers, where we talk about writing. And then we formed this little blog. Ruth and Missy did first, and then invited the rest of us to come on board. And we've been going for about 7 years now. So there are a lot of recipes in the archives, but we talk about ourselves, our families, where we are, trips we take. Today's post is about a trip that Missy took to Knoxville to visit her son. And so we share food, we share recipes, we share pictures of puppies and grandchildren and everything else. We have a lot of fun on the blog, and we would love to have people come and visit.
Well, we'll be sure and put that link in the notes too.
Okay, great.
That was good. And again, those pictures were just lovely. I don't know who does your photography, but
I do.
Do you do? Oh my gosh, you have it on. Yeah,
it's one of my hobbies, and I really enjoy it.
Oh, so did you take the ones that are like the headers for your?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yep.
Oh wow.
I took all of those. Yeah.
They're beautiful. The blog is beautiful. I mean, it's just some blogs or websites you just go to, and there's just this immediate calming to them, and I love that about yours.
I wanted it to reflect my books, and I try to have that sense of home in my books, and so I wanted my blog to reflect that same feeling.
Yeah, I think it does. Well, This has been just so much fun. And again, let's show The Sound of Distant Thunder again, that book cover, because you'll want to get hold of that and read that about the Civil War and about a young man who's really trying to live out his faith, but also wants to, struggle between what do I do? Yeah.
Right.
About protecting my country too. And Naomi's Hope, which I should say is the third book in the, I've got it written, Journey to Pleasant Prairie series. And I did not, there were moments when I thought, oh, I think I'm missing out on a few little things, but you can read it as a standalone, but I'm sure that the other two books are just as wonderful. So
yes, you get more out of the book if you've read the whole series.
Yeah, because there are always those little moments you think, oh, I wish I knew more of Hannah's story or more of Maddie's story, and those are the first books in that series. So my final question to all of my guests is, when you are done with a book, when you finally reach the end, you're able to send it off to your editor, what do you do to unwind?
I go hiking in the Black Hills is my favorite.
Love that idea.
And if the weather's not cooperating, because we get a lot of snow here in the wintertime, we don't go hiking as much, then my addiction is counted cross stitch.
Really?
I have 2 or 3 projects going on at the same time. I'm finishing up my daughter-in-law's Christmas stocking right now. But I have some other larger projects I work on, and I rotate. Every month I change to the next project. So it keeps everything fresh. And that's what I do in the evening and on Sunday afternoons, rainy days.
I love that. I used to do counter cross stitch, and it's been, oh my gosh, it's been years, but I have like half finished projects in a tote, and I think someday I'm going to get back to that.
Well, one thing I learned when I got back into it, because I started in the 80s when a lot of people did.
Me too.
And I went to knitting and other needlework. I love all kinds of handcrafts like that. But when I came back to counter cross stitch, I found out that the world has changed with the advent of the internet and the PDF viewers, so that the patterns are used in different ways. There are different techniques for stitching. The one design I'm working on is from a place called Heaven and Earth Designs, and the patterns are all computer generated, and the colors are fabulous, and the details fabulous, and all done in cross stitches. No outlining, no half stitches, none of that. And when the projects are finished, they look like paintings.
Oh, and that's amazing.
It is. It's just a fabulous project to work on. It's going to take me the rest of my life. I know that.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you said that, because I think, I want to get one of those.
You can get smaller ones. The one I got is extra large, but.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to meet you and to talk
about
your books. It truly has. And again, I really did. I loved, and I don't say that lightly, I love Naomi's Hope, and look forward to reading more.
Thank you.
Stories. Yeah.
Thank you.
And thanks to everyone for being with us and for watching the interview and just being a member of my Novelists Unwind community. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.